So let's chat a little bit about cultivating healthy landscape, scale relationships, and touching on non-native and native species and defining invasive.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, going back to thinking about how many folks are on this landscape at any time, I think that one of the big pieces of work that we have that's, it's soft work. It's not going out in the field and pulling weeds or maintaining a trail. Yeah. It is working with the community of folks who visit this place and helping them understand what being in healthy and right relationship to these landscapes looked like. And I think that that's something that a lot of folks are thinking about culturally, being in right relationship with one another, being in right relationship with communities we're not a part of, and the plants and animals that live in these natural areas that's another community that we need to consider in the same light. And so we do a lot of outreach. We are a grassroots organization, and so we involve our volunteers at every level of our organization, all the way from making decisions about how we maintain trails and what we do on trails, to what strategies we use for encouraging the native species that live here and managing the species that might be pushing them out of those spaces. And so that's a big cultural project that we're engaged in. And I think it's worth noting too that humans have been a part of the ecology of the ecosystems that we have been indigenous to for as long as we've existed. And so othering humans from the landscapes that we're existing in is, that disconnection, I think, gives a lot of folks a license to be less caring and less responsible.
That makes sense.
On those landscapes.
Yeah. I like the term othering. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's just whatever isn't you.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that with things that don't have eyes.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that's really beautiful about the herbalism community is that the relationship with plants is such a keystone of the work. Yeah. And I think that I can speak for a lot of the folks in the conservation world where that's the same for us. Yeah. I have deep personal relationships with Danthonia californica that grows on the coast where I grew up, and it grows in Olympia, Washington, where I learned so much, and it grows here in the valley. It's just a plant that's existed everywhere that's been important to me. And I think that recognizing the role that we have in opening folks' eyes and awareness up to what that plant is in the first place, that's one of those first steps. And so a lot of that too is thinking about, what is a native plant? What is a non-native plant? What does invasive mean? And what are, and we are working with another term, which is encroaching. And so, native plants are those plants that have been evolving on these landscapes for millions of years. They've been co-evolving. They have relationships with one another. They have relationships with the indigenous people who have been here for time immemorial. And those relationships have been disturbed in big ways by Euro-American colonization and the plants that have come with that institution. And so, non-native species represent all of that import that has happened. But often, I think that the idea of non-native is just one and the same with invasive. And I think that there's a lot more depth there that is important to consider. So, invasive species are ones that I really think of as not being in right relationship with their neighbors, right? It's a behavior. And these species, they're not choosing to be malevolent. You know, they don't have a sense of morality. They are just living their best lives in the place that they've been plopped.
Right.
And so, you know, when we start to work with plants like blackberries, like Scots broom, like teasel, it's another relationship. And so thinking about, okay, how can we encourage this plant to behave in ways that make space for all of the native species who were here before it, and make space for this habitat and ecosystem being vibrant and functioning well. So it's not about eradication. It's really about stewarding those plants' existence on the landscape that we're never going to get rid of them. You know, restoration is not about returning to some mythical pre-state, because that's not possible, right? Time happens, and we are where we are.
That's a sticker. Time happens.
And so I think it's really a matter of recognizing the role that we as humans, and particularly I think we as Euro-American settlers, have in stewarding the relationships with the plants that we decided had a role here to play, or accidentally brought here. But far more of the plants that we see and we have to work with in these ways are ones that were brought here intentionally. You know, Scots broom.
Or unintentionally.
Or, sure. But I think that intentional piece is really important to recognize, because it captures the role that these plants have, and the role that they were intended to have by someone at some point. So like Scots broom was brought to Oregon to beautify and stabilize soils on the sides of our roadsides. It did that job really well.
Talk about a demonized plant too.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you think about the ecology and the natural history of that plant, it loves disturbance. Humans create a lot of disturbance. It fixes nitrogen in those soils, which is beneficial to all sorts of plants, native and non-native. And yeah, those yellow flowers are really pretty if you don't necessarily have all of the other context for what that plant is doing on the landscape, right? And so recognizing that, that plant had a role to play, and we brought it here. It played that role for us really well, and now the genie's out of the bottle, and it's doing what it needs and wants to do, and what it has evolved to do, where it came from for millions of years. And so, I think that just all feeds into this like landscape scale idea of relationships and and just acting in healthy ways where we live, and in the places that we enjoy.
I think that was so beautifully put. I think you should honestly consider teaching at an herb conference. I think a lot of people would really dig it. It was very beautifully put. You're not demonizing the plants. You're talking about stewardship versus eradication. Just a really cool way to look at it. There's a book, I want to say, it's called like Evil Plants. Have you heard of this? Like,
I haven't.
I think it's basically about different plants throughout history who've been used, like, say, to poison people or whatever. And it's just, I'm not really digging like, putting those types of labels on plants, because they're thriving and they, I guess, serve a function and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you put that really beautifully. Keep rambling.
Great, will do.
Native, non-native is very divisive. I like how you did weed in quotations too. What's the quote? A weed is a plant whose virtues are unknown. Yeah. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Yeah.
It's I love that quote, and it's like the herbal community. I mean, my spirit plant's dandelion. You know what I mean? Which is like the weed. Are you getting all this?
I am.
Okay. No, it's all good.